Hello, welcome to another edition of Prophecy in the News. There's a war coming in Israel. It's a 3,000-year-old prophecy that you're going to want to hear about today. We've got a special guest with us. He's written a new book on Psalm 83. Be sure to tune in. You're going to want to hear about what's happening on the horizon. Hello, welcome to another edition of Prophecy in the News. We've got a great program for you today. I want to let you know right off the bat that the irrepressible Gary Stearman is very sick with the flu. He's had the flu for 2 weeks. Fortunately, I have been blessed to be able to fill in today with one of the smartest theologians and guests that we have ever had on the set of Prophecy in the News, which is wonderful for me. His name is Bill Salus. And you may have heard of Bill. Bill is going to be appearing all over the United States on virtually every Christian program in America. He's written this new book, Psalm 83, The Missing Prophecy Revealed. It's a 3,000-year-old prophecy that you're going to want to hear about. Bill, let me welcome you to the set of Prophecy in the News.
Well, thank you very much, Bob. It's great to be here with you.
We're going to be talking about something today that the average Christian knows nothing about. Although this is a subject that they're going to hear about, and they're going to hear about it very soon, because there's a war coming in Israel, isn't there?
There really is, Bob. 65 years Israel's been a nation. They'll be celebrating their 65th birthday here on May 14th of 2013. And really, the Arab Spring and all the things that have been happening over the last couple of years are really pointing toward a conflict. Land for Peace deals aren't working. It really will come to a war, and the concern is there are biblical wars in the prophetic wars in the Bible, and I believe we're headed for those real soon.
Well, there are a series of wars in the Bible. I find it kind of funny and a little peculiar that there's a group of people, many of them Christians, who don't even believe that the land of Israel and that the Israelites in the land today are God's chosen people. And let's put it this way, Hitler sure knew who the Jews were. Mm-hmm. And we've watched these wars come throughout history. After the Holocaust, Israel was gathered back in the land in 1948. And right away, right off the bat, they were attacked by the Arabs. They were attacked by their neighbors. They wanted to drive Israel into the Mediterranean Sea. So those Arabs certainly knew who the Jews were. And we went from 1948 to 1967 to the Six-Day War to the Yom Kippur War in 1973. And we've had multiple conflicts in this Land for Peace movement since then. I want you to talk real briefly about some of those conflicts that bring us up to the stage where we are today. And then we're going to launch into the whole Psalm 83 war that's coming soon.
Absolutely. Those conflicts were a telltale indicator that we are heading for a climactic conclusion of the Arab-Israeli conflict. You pointed them out well. 1948, the War of Independence, the year Israel became a nation, followed shortly thereafter by the Six-Day War in 1967. 1973, you had intifadas that followed that as well. You had the 34-day conflict in the summer of 2006 between Hezbollah and Israel. You had Operation Cast Lead, the 22-day conflict between Hamas and Israel. And all of this points to the unsettling that's going on in the Middle East. The Land for Peace deals are not working. And at this point in time, when diplomacy fails, wars begin.
Well, diplomacy is definitely failing. If you watch just what's happened in the last year in the Middle East, you've had the rise of the Muslim Brotherhood. You've had the fall of the despots, one after another, falling, like bowling pins. Saddam Hussein, Hosni Mubarak. Now we've got a conflict in Syria where Mr. Assad is actually attacking his own people. There's talk of chemical weapons. This is a disaster, a boiling cauldron waiting to happen, waiting to overflow. And I want you to talk about Psalm 83 because to us it seems to culminate, in this one psalm. Now this is a 3,000-year-old psalm. Tell us a little bit about the background of the psalm and who wrote it.
Absolutely. It's an ancient Hebrew prophecy written about 3,000 years ago by the psalmist Asaph. Asaph had a couple capacities we find out in the Bible. One, he was King David's one of his chief worship leaders. Also, he was a psalmist, of course. He wrote 12 of the 150 psalms. But he was also a prophet. We're told in 2 Chronicles 29, verse 30, that he was a chozah. He was a seer. The Hebrew word is chozah, a beholder of vision, a prophet. Much like Jeremiah, Isaiah, Ezekiel, he had that accolade of being a prophet. And at a time when Israel was experiencing a period of unprecedented blessings from the Abrahamic covenant. They were in their land. They had their chosen king, King David. They were making plans to build their temple. They were conquering the enemies and annexing land. They were growing in size. Asaph gets this amazing prophecy that amounts to nothing short of taking over the promised land by Israel's enemies trying to take it over, and genocide of the Jewish people.
Well, it's kind of fascinating, and I'm going to read the psalm in a minute just to give people the gist of what we're talking about here. But there's another thing that I find ironic. I just finished watching our friend Jonathan Cahn's DVD, The Masada Mystery. And it's the whole story of Masada and the destruction of Israel, the scattering to the four winds, and how these 960 people committed suicide on the mountain of Masada in Israel.
Absolutely.
And there was a scroll found up there, and the scroll was 2,000 years old, and on the scroll they found a verse that talked about Israel being gathered again in the promised land in the latter days. Tell us about the Psalm 83 scroll, because this is a bizarre and utterly fascinating story. The Irish version of the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Absolutely, and many of your audience might not be familiar with this, but in 2006, July 26, 2006, a construction worker in Ireland was with his backhoe in Irish bog soil, which means muddy bog soil. And he was doing a construction project. This was not an archaeological dig with toothbrushes. These were excavators with backhoes and bulldozers. And he was stopped short of his project because he realized there was a bunch of antiquities scattered about in this bog soil. And what they were, Bob, and most of them were fragmented and dilapidated, and they're in a museum presently for restoration, was a bunch of the Book of Psalms written in Latin. They'd been buried under there for about 1,200 years. But one psalm among all the 150 psalms was unblemished, wasn't fragmented, was open in place. And guess what psalm that was?
Let me guess, Psalm 83.
Psalm 83, Bob, and the reason, and that's a miracle in itself, written in Latin 1,200 years, could have been found in 1800s, 1600s, or never, or ruined. But let me tell you what's interesting about this, that when that psalm was found, it was found at a time where the conflict between Israel and Hezbollah had been going on in the summer of 2006 from July into August, and 2 weeks into that conflict, this discovery is made. And the reason that's significant is because of the 31,173 verses in the Bible, of the 1,189 chapters in the Bible, of the 150 Psalms in the Bible, there's only one place where you're going to find any resemblance of Hezbollah and Israel in a conflict. The inhabitants of Tyre, they're listed in the Psalm, and I know you're going to read that to the audience. And Israel going pinned together in a conflict. Only place in the Bible you will find that. And that, to me, is not coincidence. That's providence. At the same time, I'm introducing Psalm 83 through my initial book, Israelistine, which now the new book you're offering, Psalm 83, the missing prophecy revealed, how Israel becomes the next Mideast superpower, is a culmination of 11 years of research. And I was writing about Psalm 83 when this all happened.
Well, looking back, you were the only one that really has looked at the perspective that you have in this new Psalm 83 book. In fact, I love the book. I love the cover design. I actually had a little input into that. And the subtitle, The Missing Prophecy Revealed, to me is really significant because there are things we overlook in the Bible sometimes, and sometimes the Lord brings them to our attention. And this Psalm 83, you're not going to hear it discussed in church. I mean, unless you're a real prophecy lover and a fan of prophecy in the news, you probably know nothing about it. But what I find interesting about the Psalm, and this is one of the areas of I know you have great expertise in, is there's a lot of countries named in here whose names are different today. And I really want you to elaborate on that so people really understand who these nations are in Psalm 83. And the reason I say that is because there's another well-known prophecy, Ezekiel 38 and 39, the Battle of Gog and Magog. I know many of you are familiar with that. The Psalm 83 battle and the Ezekiel 38 and 39 battle are two different things. So let me read the psalm real quick, and we'll talk about the differences between those two battles because people get them confused. There are multiple wars on the horizon. We want to make sure we keep them in the proper chronological order.
Great.
Now, Psalm 83, reading from a psalm of Asaph, "Keep not thou silence, O God, hold not thy peace, be not still, O God, for lo, thine enemies make a tumult. They that hate thee have lifted up their head. They've taken crafty counsel against thy people," that's the Jewish people, "and consulted against thine hidden ones. They've said, Come, let us cut them off from being a nation. that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. They knew who the Jews were. For they've consulted together with one consent. They're confederate against thee. And here's the names: the tabernacles of Edom, and the Ishmaelites, of Moab, the Hagarenes, Gebal, Ammon, Amalek, the Philistines, with the inhabitants of Tyre. Assur also is joined with them, and they've been helped by the children of Lot. And then what happens later in the chapter is God talks about how they meet their destruction and a prayer for their destruction. And he says, they said, let us take to ourselves the houses of God in possession. Bill, what do they really want here? What's the houses of God mean to you?
Well, in some translations, it's the pastures of God. Really, what they want is the land, the promised land. If this prophecy was about to find final fulfillment in our time, and I do believe it's an imminent prophecy, it could happen at any time. What they want is not a two-state solution. They don't want land for peace deals. They want one more Arab state, and they want to call it Palestine. And this is what's really in the news right now. The United Nations with Mahmoud Abbas at the end of November, what did he do? He went in and appealed to the United Nations, sidestepping Israel, so that there could be a state of Palestine. Now, of course, he was only granted non-member state observer status, but that's the step along the way where they want to go with this. Hamas don't even recognize Israel's right to exist over there in the Gaza area. So this is what it's about. Now, Bob, what you just read is very important, and I'm going to take a moment to expound upon it here. You have a contemporary confederacy of 10 populations, and we're going to list who they are for your audience in just a moment, that come together. They form crafty counsel against the Jewish people, and they have a mandate. And what that mandate is, they want to cut the nation off, that the name of Israel is remembered no more. In some translations, that's how that's said. And they are confederate against thee, Lord. They form a league against thee, is what some of the translations say in Psalm 83, verse 5. And who they are, the tabernacles of Edom, some translations, the tents of Edom, listed first among the 10 populations. That's very important. Whenever you have a population listed first in a confederate effort, they sort of are the star of the show. Their plight is being bannered here.
So who is Edom today?
Okay, the Edomites today. Esau, the twin brother of Jacob, fathered the Edomites. We see this in Genesis 36. The Palestinian refugees today, and they have ethnical representation from the Edomites inside of them. Not all Palestinians are Edomites, but I believe that's who Asaph was alluding to. The Palestinian refugees, their plight. Now, tents of, when you hear of tents in the Bible, and they're listed in habitation condition, the tents of Edom, that refers to military encampments or refugee conditions biblically. So I believe you have the Palestinian refugees, their plight being bannered, and it's being upheld by these other populations that you listed. And who are they? You want me to go through the list of who they are?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment. A lot of our viewers know that even the word Palestinian comes from the root word Philistine. And of course, who were the Philistines? They were the worst, the nastiest, the most evil enemies of Israel in Bible days. And giving them the name the Palestinians was kind of a backhanded slap to the Jewish people, that they named their enemy. They took on this name, and that's a whole story for another program. I would like you to go through, some of the other names here. We've got the tabernacles of Edom, the Ishmaelites of Moab, and the Hagarenes, which is an interesting name.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm going to just list them all for you, and we'll go through the whole landscape there. First of all, it's important for your audience to know, especially as we make the distinction between Psalm 83 and Ezekiel 38, as we get into the program here. You've got all the countries listed in Psalm 83 are Islamic, and they all share common borders with Israel. And they would include, if it were to find application today, the nations I'm about to list and the terrorist populations within those nations. So, for instance, the inhabitants of Tyre, we'll just go from north all the way through east, around through the south.
So these are all the immediate neighbors of Israel.
Lebanon, Hezbollah is in there. That's Gebal and the inhabitants of Tyre. You read Assur. Well, that's also Assyria. That would be, at the time Asaph wrote, would have been northern Iraq and northern Syria. So we would put Iraq and Syria in there. Ammon, Moab, and Edom. That would be Jordan by their ancient names. Ammon was northern Jordan. Moab was central Jordan. Edom, also they migrated into Israel. Edomites, they became Idumeans when the Greek language came into being. So you have Jordan, and you have the West Bank area right in there with the Palestinian refugees. The Ishmaelites. Ishmael was the father of the Arabs, and a country was to come out of his loins, and most of us would say that would be Saudi Arabia. The Hagarenes. Hagar was the mother of Ishmael. She was an Egyptian matriarch. Egypt, we believe Egypt could be in here, and that also would include the Muslim Brotherhood. Philistia is listed. You read that in there. That would be where the Hamas are, over in the Gaza area there. So what you've got right now is everyone hostile to Israel that's been in all those wars for the most part in one way or another in 48, 67, and 73, that they're going to come together in a climactic concluding war to destroy the nation of Israel.
Bill, I'm so glad you're here with us today, because I'll tell you, this is a confusing area for me. It's a confusing area for all biblical scholars and people who love prophecy. You need to get this book. Now, this is a beautiful book, and I'm a book guy, so when I hold a book and I see a cover, I'm not a Kindle guy. I like having books in my library. I just got this last night, and I stayed up to about 2:30 in the morning reading this last night, and it literally is the most fascinating read on so many different levels you can't even imagine. In fact, Bill just said to me earlier, Bob, we could do 4 programs on this book. And I said, well, if Gary were here, we could do 8. And so not only is it a book, but Bill has produced a 3-hour DVD, which is 3 DVDs in this set, which is a teaching DVD. All this information we're sharing on the program today, so much more is in the book, so many things that we're not going to cover. Talk about the doom of Damascus, talking about America in prophecy. We're going to probably do another program today and cover the prophecies and the doom of Egypt. And I know a lot of prophecy and the new students are really fascinated by that. Now, you can get the book today, Psalm 83, The Missing Prophecy Revealed. This is what no one's talking about. The information in here came right out of Bill's brain via the Lord Jesus Christ, because this is new material, this is unique, this is different. The book is $15.95. Here's the DVD. It's actually 3 DVDs. It's $19.95. You can buy them individually, or you can buy them in a package together at a small discount. Ask for the Psalm 83 package. It's $34.95. It includes the book, includes the DVD. The toll-free number is on your screen right now. Now, Bill, let's take a look at some of these nations and the ancient hatred. Now, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself here, because I do want to talk to you about Ezekiel 83.
38, yeah.
Ezekiel 38, but we've got Psalm 83 here on one side, and you believe this is the first war, correct?
I do. I think this war sets the stage for even a bigger war in Ezekiel 38 and 39, where Russia forms a coalition with Iran and Turkey and Ethiopia and several other countries and comes to invade Israel for an entirely different reason.
They're separated by a period of time. How close do you think the Psalm 83 war is?
I think the Psalm 83 war could happen at any given time. Those Arabs, in light of what's going on with the Arab Spring and the insanity, for lack of a better word, that's going on in the Middle East right now. I mean, let's face it, Israel's never been more isolated and threatened in all of its entire history, because the weapons they've got pointed against them could actually decimate the Jewish state. And so I would say that Psalm 83 is what I'm watching for. I wake up every morning and I'm wondering when the missiles are going to be flying and in which direction in the Middle East. And that could be anywhere from Israel shooting them over into Iran, Iran calling on their proxy Syrian Hezbollah to go to war with Hamas against Israel. That could be Syria shooting chemical weapons into Israel, because they've got a large chemical arsenal floating, wandering around there in Syria that's uncontrollable, really, if the Free Syrian Army gets their hands on it as well. So I think Psalm 83 could happen at any given time.
Now, how does the Muslim Brotherhood and the rapid expansion of what's happened in the last year in the Middle East and the Brotherhood taking over countries, and how does that fit into Psalm 83?
Well, Egypt is in Psalm 83. The Muslim Brotherhood is in Egypt. That's where their main home is. Their tentacles, of course, are throughout the whole Middle East and much of the world, actually. But the Muslim Brotherhood, who had been repressed for about 5 decades, they were founded in 1928 by Hassan al-Banna as a political and religious movement. They have been repressed. They attempted to assassinate Gamal Nasser. Then they were successful in assassinating Anwar Sadat, the president of Egypt. And now they've got Mubarak. He's out, he's in life sentence in prison, and now it's their time to shine. They founded the Hamas in 1987. They want to liberate the Gaza. Mohammed Morsi, the president of Egypt, he wants to form a United States of the Arabs. They want to form the capital in Jerusalem, not Cairo. This is part of his political campaign. He's pretty much taking it easy right now, because he's got a lot of money he's trying to bring in. He's got billions of dollars coming in. He's got 20 billion pledged from Qatar. He's got 2 billion pledged from Turkey. He's got 1.65 billion pledged from America. He's got 4.8 billion in a loan pledged from the International Monetary Fund. He's got 3.75 billion pledged from Saudi Arabia to come in. He's got a loan of 5 billion from the EU if the IMF gives the loan. I don't mean to be throwing all these numbers at your people, but here's the point. He is going to have a lot of money coming in, and presently he can't get that money coming in as we tape this program with instability in Egypt. That's why you're starting to see him doing what he can to calm down the violence over there, to keep the military at bay, because once those monies come in, watch out. He's going to move on his agenda.
And those are billions, not millions.
That's what it is.
And the money is coming from everywhere. You know, this is an ancient hatred that you really can't understand by watching the news. You know, the average American who doesn't understand that Israel, they're God's chosen people. The Bible calls them the apple of his eye. The prophet Zechariah talks about Jerusalem being a burdensome stone in the last days, that all who kick their foot against it are going to stumble and fall, and they're going to be destroyed. And, you know, it all goes back to Abraham and Sarah, this ancient hatred. Unless you really understand and read the Bible and the book of Genesis and understand why this hatred exists, I mean, the truth is there's not going to be any peace in the Middle East, is there, Bill?
No, there's not. And this is why they can't figure out how to resolve the conflict. The international community is not savvy to what we're about to share with your audience right now. This is a deep-rooted hatred that goes back 4,000 years ago that has been perpetuated throughout time, and it's alive and well in the Middle East right now.
Can you give us a little background on the start of this with Abraham and his land covenant?
Absolutely, we can. And I want to introduce, first of all, there's a chapter in the book called The Ancient Hatred. And the two words, when they're pinned together, ancient hatred, they show up in Ezekiel 35:5 and they show up in Ezekiel 25:15. The Hebrew words are olam ibah. And when they're pinned together, what it stands for is a hatred that was developed long ago, perpetuated throughout time, manifesting in hostility with no apparent end in sight. It's a cancerous hatred. If it went unchecked, it would come to a war period, and that's where it's coming. That's what it's going to. Now, what happened 4,000 years ago? God made a covenant with the patriarch Abraham. He said in Genesis 12, verses 2 and 3, that he would make him a great nation, give him a great name, and through him all the families of the earth would be blessed. Ultimately, that we find in different passages, it's a messianic prophecy. Through his seed all the families of the earth would be blessed. His seed, the Messiah, Jesus Christ. But he goes on to say, I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse those who curse you. So he's going to make Abraham a great nation, and he issues his Gentile foreign policy in that same section right there. I will bless those who bless you. That extrapolates to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and the Jewish people, but I will curse those who curse you. So you have this. Now Abraham, it's interesting to note, Abraham means father of multitudes, but he was the first Hebrew. See, this is the distinction here. You had the Hebrew, then you have the Gentiles that came from there. The Hebrew means to pass over. So God called Abraham out of the pagan world that he was in, pass over from that, be the father of multitudes of a great nation. So now you have a Hebrew and the rest are Gentiles. And so what he's saying to Abraham there is that I will bless those who bless you, Hebrews. I will curse those who curse you. Hebrews, of course, later known as the Israelis, the Jews, things like that.
Well, as we get further into the relationship with God and Abraham and Sarah and the covenant, of course, Isaac and Ishmael came out of this. And I want to read a passage in Genesis 17, which really kind of lays the groundwork for why there's a conflict here today between these two brothers that started this war. And it says, God said, Sarah thy wife shall bear thee a son indeed, and thou shalt call his name Isaac, and I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant, and with his seed after him. And as for Ishmael, I have heard thee. Behold, I have blessed him, and will make him fruitful, and will multiply him exceedingly. 12 princes shall he beget, and I will make him a great nation. That's all the Saudi Arabian, oil-rich nations. But then he says very clearly, and if you believe the Bible, you just simply can't deny this. And it says, but my covenant will I establish with Isaac, which Sarah shall bear unto thee at this set time in the next year. So we kind of have God just basically laying down the law there with Isaac and Ishmael. Isaac is the covenant seed. Now, I want to flip back real quick. We know this Psalm 83 war is coming. You've indicated and given us the names of these nations and how this event is going to play out. Then we have the Ezekiel 38 war, which, do you think those two wars are connected in any way, where one kind of leads to the other? Because the nations are different in both those wars.
Yeah, I make clear distinctions between the wars, and I put Psalm 83 as the precursing war that presents Israel in the position described in Ezekiel 38 when that war happens. I would like to segue into that. I do want to say one thing. I want to conclude talking about that ancient Arab hatred briefly in a nutshell. That rich covenant that was given to Abraham, passed on through Isaac, as you read, on through Jacob, it goes on through to the Jewish people today. The rich contents of that covenant were coveted by all the matriarchs and patriarchs. Hagar, she was jealous. She wanted that to be passed on to Ishmael. Even though Ishmael was promised his own nation, it was not the same covenant blessing that was promised to Isaac. Yeah. Those were the brothers. Then you had the twins, Esau and Jacob. Jacob later became called Israel. Esau fathered the Edomites. There was conflicts there. And I point these out where you can read about all these conflicts. And then you had the cousins, the Hebrews against Moab and the Ammonites. And it goes on the great-grandkids, Amalek, a grandson of Esau. It's amazing how that happened. Now remember, Bob, when this was going on, they didn't have Sony PlayStations and Wii games and internet and YouTube. They sat around and talked about how they got cheated out of the blessings of the Abrahamic covenant. Sat around the campfire and got upset and passed it on and perpetuated this hatred through the generations.
And it still exists today.
Yeah. Do we have time to go through Ezekiel 38, or is that the next program?
We'll probably save that for the next program, because we're going to talk about some fascinating things about Egypt and the destruction of some things you've shared with me are just off the wall spectacular. I want you to make sure you get a look at Bill's new book, Psalm 83, The Missing Prophecy Revealed. I've never seen so many answers. In fact, reading every chapter was like a collection of the Bible's greatest hits. I mean, every one had a title that just kind of lured me into the book and maybe just realized I have to have this book. Now, I've been waiting for this for months. So when you brought it last night, it definitely thrilled my soul. But this is the book that's going to answer the questions about the coming war. This war is getting really close. It's imminent. It could happen. It could happen today. It could break loose at any time. And when it happens, I think it's going to trigger an absolute flood of things that the Bible described 2,000-3,000 years ago. They're happening in the world we live in. There's the book. It's $15.95. There's the DVD. It's actually 3 DVDs, a 3-hour teaching series on the Psalm 83 war, which is right on the horizon. You have any final thoughts you want to share with us today?
Well, Bob, I'm telling you, this is what I'm watching for right now. I mentioned earlier in the program, 6 decades have come and gone. The Lord has given the international community that much time to try to resolve the conflict over there. They can't resolve it. They don't know about the ancient hatred. They're disconnected from Genesis 12, that they should be blessing Israel. And at this point in time, I think that the weapons that are amassed against Israel that could decimate the Jewish state, I think that it's time that this war is going to come, and that's where it's headed.
Well, great program. This is Bob Ulrich with Bill Salus, and as our tradition here at Prophecy in the News says, keep looking up.
Prophecy in the News is a viewer-supported program made possible by our many friends around the world. Be sure you tune in every day for breaking news and our daily prophetic news updates at prophecyinthenews.com, or follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/prophecyinthenews.